What is up? Welcome back. 2023-2024 NBA season previews. My name is Matt Hanifan. I'm with Jackson Law. What's going on, man?
Look at my chops, man. Just let's get to games. I'm excited.
Please, yeah, this is like we've talked about it already, but this is like Christmas Day or like
Yes.
what your favorite. Just imagine your favorite day or your favorite holiday, and that's exactly what today is. It's opening night. We have basketball, but today we're not going to be talking about the four teams that play today. We're going to be talking about the Los Angeles Clippers, who over the last several seasons, it's been a very disappointing stretch for them, at least in terms of like what their expectation is and then what they ultimately finish as. Last year they were 44 and 38. They get bounced in the first round by the Phoenix Suns in 5 games. Paul George gets hurt at the end of the season. Kawhi, I think, yeah, he got hurt in the playoffs as well. Uh, they entered last season as one of the more interesting teams in the league, but they just couldn't really put it together throughout the season. They were 17th in offense, 17th in defense, 17th in net rating. Kawhi Leonard played 52 games. Paul George played 56 games. They did make a midseason trade for both Russell Westbrook, Trey's favorite player, and Mason Plumlee. And I mean, they both kind of helped in terms of like some like impact, but it ultimately wasn't enough to put them over the top. Jackson, what are your kind of thoughts of what's happened, maybe over just the last several years, but last year specifically, at least heading into this year?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you can go back and look at previous season previews that the site has done, and everyone's going to sound like it's going to sound like we're just repeating ourselves. It's going to sound like the exact same video
Yeah.
because it's the same story with the Clippers. Last year's no different than the year before and the previous year before that, even in the bubble. It's just the inability to stay healthy, regardless of all the other pieces that are coming in and out. They've made numerous trades over the years to try to get guys in here to supplement those times that Kawhi and PG are out and to try to be complementary pieces when they're there. And they are complementary, but just again, something always happens. One of the two main guys is always getting hurt, or they just don't have the chemistry and they have a very disappointing series, kind of like where the bubble is like the one instance where it's like both main guys were healthy. They just had a very disappointing, blowing a massive lead to, was that a 3-1 lead to the yeah, it was a 3-1 lead to the
Yeah.
Nuggets
And game
in the
seven was a disaster where it was like Paul George bricked it off the
yeah.
side of the backboard late in the
Yeah,
game.
it's all
It
coming back
just
now. Yeah.
completely fell apart. Yeah.
Yeah, but and I agree because you mentioned that last year they're one of the most intriguing teams. They're one of the most intriguing teams again this year, and there's anyone can put the Clippers, and like I know we'll get to our predictions later, but anyone could put the Clippers as a top 3 team in the Western Conference, and they're totally justified in doing so on paper when you look at them. Even when they have a player like Russell Westbrook on their roster, they did find ways to utilize Westbrook and to kind of bring the best of whatever the modern Westbrook is to bring it out of him and supplement some sort of play. And they have great players on this team. I'm a huge Terrence Mann fan. I love Terrence Mann. Okay, he's just one of those dudes that I see him play, and I'm like, I vibe. I like him. Zubox is an amazing rebounder. I covet him now that Steven Adams is gone. I even threw him in there as in like this probably isn't going to happen, but I'd love to see it happen type of trade for the Grizzlies. There's a lot to love about this team. There's just the biggest question mark, and it's a massive question mark, is can their two main players stay healthy? And it's not even can they stay healthy? Can they stay healthy enough? Because we can't ask the question, can they stay healthy and play, you know, more than 65 games? Maybe even 60 games is out of the question. But can they, not only can they stay healthy enough to get a decent matchup in the playoffs, but can they be healthy at the right time? Can you get both Kawhi and PG healthy at the end of the season, give them enough time to kind of catch their, get in rhythm and then hit the ground running in the playoffs? Because matched up again on paper against most teams, they look really good. And I like their chances against most teams in the West. It's just the health concerns.
Right. Right. Exactly. Just looking at it right here, they had 18 guys play at least 20 games last year for them. So that's kind of just to give you an idea of how much influx they were with their rotations. I didn't think Tyronn Lue had the best season last year, just in terms of like some of those rotations. Like he had way too, like, I'm not gonna mince words. He had way too much leash with Marcus Morris last year.
Mm-hmm.
Way too much leash. And he didn't have enough leash for, again, Terrence Mann, who
Mm-hmm.
you like. I also like him a lot. And I think he's an impact rotation guy. They had a lot of leash at times for Robert Covington, who took a step back. They had a lot of leash for Reggie Jackson before he got traded. Like they had a lot of leash, or he had a lot of leash for a few of these guys who I didn't think were they weren't really impacting the rotation that much. And it got a little bit better once Westbrook and Plumlee came to town, and they were a little bit more like impactful. But it still wasn't enough because of those because it was in and out of like guys in and out, specifically Paul George and Kawhi Leonard at the end of the season. So that's ultimately what it really comes down to. Like Nick Batum took a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Zubac is like a solid player. Norman Powell is like, if you sneakily look at it, he's been one of the best shooters in the league over the last 3 or 4 years. John Wall was getting valuable minutes for this team season at the beginning of the year, and it was just like, what? Like in hindsight, they traded Luke Kennard away to your Memphis Grizzlies. Like they didn't have enough impactful rotation guys to supplement Kawhi Leonard and Paul George throughout last season. And I'm just interested to see if that changes the season and kind of the rotation that like what it looks like. I mean, Ty Lue did come out and say that it's going to be Westbrook, Terrence Mann, George, Leonard, and Zubac is like the starting five to begin the season, which I commend him for that because I think it's probably the right starting lineup at least. I mean, you can make some arguments against maybe starting Russell Westbrook or whatever, but like I think it's a good, solid starting lineup to start. Like what the rest of their rotation looks like is interesting to me because again, it's not like I walked into last year thinking it was one of the deepest rotations in the league. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It simply was not. And I'm interested to see how that ultimately changes this season. I mean, they re-signed Westbrook, they re-signed Plumlee in the offseason. They did lose Eric Gordon, which I mean, I like the addition when they made that last season. They did trade for KJ Martin, a hyper athletic 6'7", 6'8" wing, a very good vertical lob threat, a good offensive rebounder, just a good rebounder in general.
Mm-hmm.
A pretty good defender in his own right. They trade really pennies on the dollar for him from Houston. They drafted Kobe Brown, who is like a 6'9", 6'10" wing who can space the floor a little bit. He was really good shooting the ball in summer league. And he was a solid defender when he was at Missouri. They drafted Jordan Miller late in the second round out of Miami. So it's like they have an injection of youth that I kind of like. I don't know if they'll have an impact from day one. They might just be guys that they send to the G League.
Yeah, kind of like plug and play guys when you need them. And there's going to be times where they're going to need that because there's going to be again probably a lot of wings, and there's going to be 30 plus games where you're missing either or both of Kawhi and PG this year. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see with the new rules with resting like quote unquote star players, how that impacts the games played. Like, do they actually play 60 or 65 games? Because they can't load manage at the same time, or at least with like if they're both healthy, of course.
Yeah.
Like how does that, I guess, impact how many games played that? Like obviously if one or both, hopefully not, but one or both suffer a serious injury or an injury that has them out for a prolonged period of time, that changes.
Yeah, things. I could easily see like, one of them's like, my ankle's pretty sore. It's a little hard to walk on a little bit. And maybe it's good enough for them to play on, but then it's like, oh, well, he said his ankle hurts and we got him checked out by our team doctors and they suggest him taking 1 or 2 nights off. So I just feel like they're just going to be filled up on the injury report more. There's always going to be ways for them to scoot around that because it's impossible for the NBA to objectively say, no, he's fine.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, maybe he does need a night off because he tweaked his ankle a few days before in practice and he just needs a night to rest it. So he's good to go.
Yeah. And like, even though these rules came out and the NBA announced that load management just doesn't work based on a study that we really don't know anything about. Teams are going to still find a way to work around it, or at least certain teams with certain players. That's just the reality of the situation. They're going to find workarounds that are kind of just exactly what you just said. Like someone's going to not fake an injury, but someone's going to say, "Oh, I'm sore," or whatever. And again, team doctors are going to rule them out or suggest they don't play, and that could ultimately change things. I'm interested to see how the league handles that, just in and of it by itself. But I guess like outside, I mean, obviously, if we're ruling out the complete cop out that I actually wrote in our preview, please go check that out about just the X factor being Kawhi Leonard and Paul George's health. What do you think the X factor, like who exactly do you think is the X factor for this team?
It's going to sound weird to say, but it's going to kind of hint on something that you said earlier. I think it's going to be Ty Lue figuring out the rotations and giving what we see as good playmakers like Terrence Mann, a guy that we both love, giving guys like that the opportunity to go out and impact games in positive ways. And maybe it's, the rookies that they drafted this year too. They're going to have time. Maybe they are two-way guys that spend most of their time in the G League, improving on their game, but then it's like there's going to be times where they're going to be called up. Ty Lue has to have faith in those guys to be able to step in and perform and to hold the fort down, essentially. And if you don't have that trust from the head coach, then things are already starting to break down before they've even really began. So that may also kind of be a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I truly think Ty Lue is going to have to figure out, because it's easy when you've got your five starters, and like most teams around the league have got their starting five figured out. But when you know that your two stars are going to miss significant amount of time just because they're injury prone players, and it's history's not going to change all of a sudden as they're getting older. They're not going to get healthier as they get older, unless there's some new science that comes out and it's like we can repair ACLs and heal within a matter of weeks. Then he's got to figure out, and he's got to be able to trust these guys. Like we said, give them longer leashes, let them do things, because a big part of just again, and again, just speaking from the Grizzlies' experience and me being so tapped and in tune with everything that's happening in Memphis, is Kennard was hesitant to shoot in Memphis, and he would be open and he'd be kind of hesitant a little bit because he was on a short leash with Ty Lue, and everyone on the team is like, Luke, shoot that thing. Like, we don't care, miss or make, shoot it. That's what you do.
Right.
And then Kennard goes out and almost ties Klay Thompson's 3-point record in a single game. So like that's the difference between giving playmakers a longer leash so that way they can perform. That way they can do what God intended them to do on this earth, which is to put a ball in a hoop and to make millions doing it.
Just that's such a cool job.
It is like, such a cool job.
But no, I'm with you there. My X factor, it's probably Norman Powell. Because I mean, he's like, if you look at this roster, there isn't a lot of shooting, and he's a guy again who's been one of the most efficient 3-point shooters over the last 4 years. He's above 40% on 5 attempts. Like he's a very efficient 3-point shooter, as well as he's good defensively. He could probably guard 2, maybe 3 different positions. He has some like on ball juice with him. Like he can score at multiple levels. He can put the ball on the deck a little bit. That's not something you're going to ask of him too much, but if there's like a hard closeout or something, that it's something he's capable of doing without turning the ball over at an incredibly high clip. I mean, playmaking, like his assist to turnover ratio, it's just like 1. Like he's not the greatest passer nor the most willing passer, but I mean, he puts the ball in the bucket. That's what he does, especially from 3-point range. And so he's probably my X factor right now. But Terrence Mann's also another one of
Yeah.
those, like,
Yeah.
he's a guy who will get you 9, 10 points a game, solid efficiency, 38, 39% from deep on pretty low volume, but a guy who can just impact the game nonetheless on both ends of the floor at certain points. We saw what he did in the playoffs to the Utah Jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to expect that from him, but I think Powell is my.
I love me some Norman Powell. I've been wanting Norman Powell in Memphis ever since 2016, because he was drafted. I double checked and looked up. He was drafted in 2015, and I can't remember if it was 2015 or 2016. My wife and I saw the Raptors play in Memphis, and Norman Powell was freaking popping off, and I was like, this dude is a certified hooper, and ever since then, I've been wanting him in a Grizzlies jersey. When he got moved over to Portland, I was like, come on, man, really? That's all it took was Gary Trent Jr. They just basically swapped the same type of players, and then he goes to the Clippers. But no, I agree. I agree with you 100%. And I think it falls in line too with my X factor with Ty Lue, with, again, letting the Terrence Manns, letting the Norman Powells go out there and do their thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like another one that I wanted to bring up was Bones Highland, because he did have such a kind of unfruitful end to his Denver tenure, with like all the stuff that came out there about him not being like a winning player and him being like selfish. I don't know how true most of that is, but he went for like 2 second-round picks or something like that.
Yeah.
At the deadline. But I mean, just from all intents and purposes, he's looked pretty good with the Clippers. Like there hasn't been any overarching issue. And I remember when I went to go see Denver last December, I was telling my dad and my dad's friend who was with me at the time, being like, yeah, Bones Highland's like, he's going to be a good player. But then all of a sudden it completely just fell apart. And all that stuff came out. And so that was an unfortunate end, but I think he's done a solid job. I think he did good with them last year. And I think just behind Russ, I think he'll do a solid job again this year if he's in the rotation.
Yeah, and like you said, the questions with Bones are not a skill issue. It's a locker room issue. Yeah. It's a personality issue, and it is a big red flag with like just how chill the Nuggets locker room is.
Yeah,
with them being like, this guy's a problem.
Yeah. Or at least hinting at that.
Yeah, hinting that this guy's a problem. Obviously they didn't come right out and say it, but yeah.
Where do you see this team like among the? I mean, we talked about the West already today with the different previews. Again, please go check that out on the YouTube page. It's, excuse my French, but it's a shit show. Like it's really just, if you boil it down to that, like there's a lot of variance, but like where do you see this team ending up?
I see them kind of being the same where they were, kind of in that 4 to 5 range. And I think that's worst case scenario for them, if I'm being completely honest. Like worst case is 5th seed, maybe a 6th seed. And because again, like they could be a game out of the 5 or 4 as a 6th seed. That's how tight the West always is. Yeah. So it's like they have one off night and that causes them to drop 2 spots in the standings and in the seeding. It's just the unfortunate truth of the Western Conference. But they could be a top 4 seed, top 3 seed. If by some chance you are able to get above 60 games out of both Kawhi and PG, I don't expect it to, which is why I have them here in this 4 to 5 range, because again, I think just getting one of them out there is going to be good enough at a time to get to that point. I think PG is very underrated these days. People don't remember the Paul George of the olden years, of the Indiana days. Dude was going to be the next superstar in the NBA until he broke his leg for Team USA, and it's just been downhill ever since then. But I see them still finishing around that 4 to 5 range. Maybe they finish a little lower, and I'm kind of like you, how you've said it with a couple of years. I'm not going to be surprised if they do like fall and they're like near a play-in team, because the West is so tight, and maybe there is significant injury. Maybe because Kawhi is not load managing, he suffers a very bad injury and plays 30, 40 games. this season, then that's going to be a pretty big problem.
Yeah, I mean, I always hate predicting injuries. I mean, I never want anyone to get injured, but that's just not how things work. I do have him as an 8 seed right now, and again, I do not feel good about this at all. I have him around like the Thunder. I have the 6 seed, Pelicans 7, Sacramento 9. I have Memphis. We previously talked about at 5. Like like maybe I'm not factoring in the new load management rules enough. Maybe I'm not factoring in Terrence Mann actually playing more than 25, 30 minutes a game. Maybe I'm not factoring in potential depth if they acquire midseason. Maybe I'm not factoring in who the hell. I mean, we didn't even talk about this. I can't believe it took us this long, but like James Harden also just might be a Clipper by the end of the year if he gets his wishes. Like I haven't factored any of that in yet. I'm just like, how healthy is this team going to be? Like last year, I didn't love what I saw from a lot of their rotation players. Maybe they have a bounce back season. Maybe they don't. But again, the West is so flippin' deep. I have a hard time having him in that 4 to 5 range, even though I could see it happening. If something happens with New Orleans, if something happens with Oklahoma City, well then boom, there's 6 seed right there, at least from what I have.
Yeah.
Maybe Phoenix isn't like this 3-headed juggernaut.
Yeah, which I know kind of off topic, but Beal's already going to miss their first game. Yeah. So it's like, is that a red flag, or is that just kind of a?
They don't have the greatest bill of health either with Durant and Beal. I don't know. I have him as an 8 seed right now. That can obviously change. I don't feel good about this at all. But
I'm not confident in mine either.
I hope they prove me wrong in the sense that I hope Kawhi Leonard and Paul George play at least 60-plus games. And I'm not saying that because I have Paul George in our Sites Fantasy League, which a very reluctant 8th round pick, by the way. Please go check out that video on the YouTube page as well.
Yeah. Especially stick around for Chick's 3rd round pick. You don't want to miss that one.
Oh man,
love you, Chick.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any final thoughts with this team? I mean, a lot of it was injury talk. Maybe they trade for James Harden. Maybe they trade even Norman Powell for James Harden. My X factor just becomes a complete nightmare.
Well, no, that's still an X factor because they use him to get a former MVP. But yeah, just health. I would be shocked if one of PG or Kawhi play 60-plus games. And I think if they do, then that would bode very well for their standings overall. And just kind of the hope that, I don't know how many Clippers fans are out there, but for the Clippers fans that are out there, would give them some sort of hope. And again, it's not just being healthy, it's being healthy at the right time. Can you get PG and Kawhi back that final month and a half of the season to get them into peak playing condition? And then is it going to be good enough to get a good enough seed to where you like the matchup, you're happy with it, you get a good matchup, and then you can try to make a playoff, make a championship push? Because some people are going to say they're not contending because they don't have enough, but in their minds they're contending. So can they find the confidence to try to make that run?
Mm-hmm. Just one more thing I want to bring up. I mean, it is like, I'm not trying to center it like it's just for James Harden, but Kawhi and Paul George both have player options at the end of the season. Marcus Morris is on an expiring deal for $17 million. Nick Batum is making $11.7 million on an expiring.
So this
Robert Covington, $11.7 million on an expiring. Mason Plumlee is on an expiring. He can't be traded, I believe, until December.
Yeah.
Terrence Mann has 1 more year left on his deal after this year. He didn't sign the extension yesterday at that deadline. Zubac has 2 years left on this deal. Like, there could be a lot of moving pieces by February, and that's what also makes it a little bit tougher to predict. I'm not necessarily saying that for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard's instance, they're not going to trade them. At least I don't think. If anything, they're probably going to give him an extension at some point next offseason. Assuming they both, opt out or opt in their player options. I think they still sign the extension. But like we could be Marcus Morris or Batum or Covington, guys who we previously mentioned, might not be on this team anymore by February.
Yeah.
They might go out and get another shooter or get more front court depth, get another guard.
Yeah, and that's
Westbrook and Bones Highland. Like,
and that's very on par with what the Clippers have done in the past. So I wouldn't doubt it.
Is there anything like? I don't think they trade Russ, but they could. If they want to sell high on him.
Anything's possible. Anything's possible.
And like, I know our guy. I'm just kidding. Bill Simmons has mentioned this on his pod before. Yes, I am sometimes a listener of the Bill Simmons podcast. No free advertisements. But they're building a new stadium in Inglewood. And so it's like they want to make sure they have the best team possible for it's going to open next year. And it looks nice. I mean, when I was in LA in December, I drove by it and it looked great. At least in like the construction, it's kind of close to SoFi, but like they're building the new arena. They want to make sure they have as good of a team as possible heading into next year. Is that going to incentivize them to trade for James Harden? Is it going to incentivize them to try to trade for someone else? Even though I think they are a second apron team, so that just becomes a lot harder. But like, what's the incentive? Like, I'm wondering, like, what's the incentive to like make a big push for something this season or next off season with this new arena? I have no idea how much that factors into it. It may be a little bit of a bad business decision to trade for James Harden when you don't know you don't know if he's going to extend, even though it was his preferred trade destination. We've seen this before from him, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, I have my own thoughts on James Harden that could take a 40-minute video. So
fair enough. I think some of us all do to an extent. With Jimbo. But thank y'all for watching. Please like and subscribe. Please go check out vendettasportsmedia.com. All of our NBA previews are going to be up there. All of our NBA season previews are going to be up on the YouTube page as well. So please go check that out. Please go check out the other content on the site and the YouTube. NHL season just got started. Fantasy football content's coming out every single week. NFL season's in full effect. College football's in full effect. The MLB postseason's in the thick of things right now. And then, of course, our NBA content. Also, go check out James's UFC stuff. He does a lot of good.
Oh yeah, he does.
If you like the MMA, and our professional wrestling section. There's a lot of good content that you can go check out at vendettasportsmedia.com, not just on the site, but on the YouTube page as well. Please go check that out. Like, subscribe, comment, tell me why I'm an idiot. Thank y'all for watching. See y'all next time.